ஏன் சஸ்டைனபிலிட்டி ESG மேனேஜ்மெண்ட் பத்தி இண்டஸ்ட்ரீஸ் இப்போ கான்சென்ட்ரேட் பண்ணிட்டு இருக்காங்க? Why they should concentrate in the future goals of bringing net zero?
Basically, I think now it's become a trend, right? It's become fancy. It's become a trend to talk about sustainability. But pretty much the problem has been the same since industrial revolution started.
Do you think is it actually possible to bring net zero in all the industries?
Right now, if you ask me, definitely not possible.
For industries who are working on sustainability, so what will be the profit for them?
So ஒரு 5-10 இயர்ஸ்ல இந்தியாவில் சஸ்டைனபிலிட்டி எப்படி ஆயிரும்னா, லைக் ஹவ் யூ ஹாவ் அ ஃபினான்ஷியல் அக்கௌண்டிங் ஆர் ஃபினான்ஷியல் ஆடிட்டர், யூ வில் ஆல்சோ ஹாவ் அ சஸ்டைனபிலிட்டி அக்கௌண்டிங் ஆர் சஸ்டைனபிலிட்டி ஆடிட்டர் who audits your entire ESG performance.
30% of carbon emission are coming from sectors like steel, cement, chemical industries, and these people. What was the biggest challenge in decarbonizing these heavy industries?
Tamil Nadu Pollution Control Board padi, probably most of these industries would also come under the red category because they, yeah. But again, wherever you have a problem, you also have an opportunity on how the problem can be addressed, right?
So recent days, people have been speaking a lot about carbon credits and carbon credits trading. Can you throw some words on it? What is carbon credits?
So what is a carbon credit is basically where you say for a ton of CO2 emission reduction is called as one carbon credit.
Where do you see these AI, ML, IoT devices or these technologies can bring your carbon net zero things?
So it takes enormous amount of carbon emission if you have to develop an AI model. So if you take Google, for example, they were actually a net zero company, but now that they've started working on their AI solutions and all that, they've actually not been able to meet their net zero goals.
Hello everyone. Thanks for joining today. Uh, so before directly going inside this, I want to introduce our today's guest speaker, Mr. Hari. So Hari has been working around sustainability. He is of Beyond Sustainability, a startup launched in 2021, supporting manufacturing companies to create ESG around their industries. So he has impacted around more than 70 industries in his career, all to the 3 years of journey. And I'm really happy to have him today. Uh, we will be speaking a lot about sustainability and how sustainability is bringing an impact to the world, and how can industries, SMEs, and all people who are working in the manufacturing field and other industries too can bring an impact inside the industry towards the mission of net zero. Thank you for joining, Harry. Welcome to the series.
Yeah, thanks, Razan. Thanks a lot for having me, and looking forward to the conversation as well.
Yeah, welcome you, Harry. So directly, I'm jumping inside. I want to know what is beyond sustainability and what we are doing inside.
So
And
what?
before that, how you started the startup, where this idea came from.
Okay. So I think it's a long story. I'll try to keep it short, but I'll start with why beyond sustainability, why we started beyond sustainability, and we'll start a little bit with my background. So then we'll touch upon what we do at beyond sustainability as well. So I was born and brought up in Coimbatore, and I did my bachelor's in instrumentation engineering in a small town called Pollachi. So from my childhood, I've always been fascinated by superheroes and people who do fight for a cause, right? By superhero, it doesn't mean they have to have some superpowers and stuff, but at least people who stand up for a cause. I was very moved by it, and I decided if I do any work, it should be something that's around a cause. Right now, my perception of it has changed a lot. What do I mean by a cause? What do I mean by value and all of that? But with the maturity that I had when I was 18 or 19, that's just the idea I had. And then I wanted to do agriculture, and I couldn't get into a public university. And I was put through to an engineering degree course, and I wasn't very fascinated by engineering. I don't blame the subject, is just that that didn't sit well for me. And I was one thing that I decided was when I graduate out of college, I will come out with a clear idea of what I'm going to do with the rest of my life, right? So that's all I'm going to figure out in the 4 years of my bachelor's. What was what I decided. So it was during the second years of my bachelor's, I came across this documentary called Before the Flood, which was by Nat Geo, and they talk a lot about climate change, the effects of climate change. In a layman term, they go to a lot of places where climate change is happening, and they explain that people talk a lot about climate change. There's very less action that's been taken. I think it's been close to 8 years since I saw the documentary. The problems pretty much only increased, or it's remained the same. There's not really still a lot of action taken, or that lot of action that needs to be taken, right? So that deeply moved me, and I wanted to do something regards to climate change and sustainability. So then went on to do an internship in Chennai with SPI Cinemas, where they had an opportunity to come explore your ikigai, and they will put you through multiple projects that are based on your ikigai, and then that can be converted into a full time and all of that, right? But some sort of a platform for you to come explore and do what you want to do. So in the final year, I did that internship. I had an opportunity to be part of multiple organizations and multiple events and all of that was happening as an intern, experimenting, doing multiple things. And we were part of an organization called Hack for Social Good, which we were trying to build, sort of an initiative where the idea was to build solutions out of hackathons for sustainable development goals. And we'll be doing multiple hackathons. So that was the idea, and that gave me a lot of exposure. And then I felt, okay, I can probably expand my knowledge, and went to the Netherlands to pursue my master's studying about climate change. It was only my stay in Space Cinemas during then that I figured out my key guys to become a social entrepreneur. So everything that I did with my masters and all of that was a journey towards it. So I went to Netherlands. The moment I was in Netherlands, it really opened up my world to be in a developed country itself, and to have classmates who came from 19 different countries and wanted to solve for this particular cause, right? I had people from Peru. I had interacted with people from Nigeria, people from uh, US even, and all of them came for this particular cause and wanted to do something about it, to get different perspectives, different viewpoints, and also the time in Europe, right? Netherlands is a great country to spend and understand sustainability, the ethos of sustainability, and I think that really opened up my world. And the more I studied about climate change, the more we were also taught that developing countries are the ones that are going to get affected a lot. So one example is they've already lot of solutions in Netherlands is around climate adaptation, which means climate change will happen, and we need to adapt to that future. While in India, we're only trying to mitigate the effects of climate change, and we're only taking a very reactive action, right? So I felt I could be more impactful back home. But again, I didn't know what I'm going to do. So I came back home. I said, okay, I'll give myself a couple of years to figure it out. If it works out, if it works out. If not, then I can go back to a job, or whatever I wanted to do, right? Then I was offered an opportunity to work with SPH again, trying to build SPH Cinemas had a social accelerator called SPH. So they offered an opportunity to work with them in building a climate accelerator. And I worked in that project for almost a year. And that my job there was to look at multiple startups across the globe and kind of identify which startup is doing impactful work in terms of what we wanted to do as an impact, and kind of advise an impact investor. So I think that gave me a different kind of exposure into the startup world. And then I had an idea for what we wanted to do at Beyond Sustainability, and then we started it out in the year 2021 per se. So initially, the idea was to work with individuals in measuring an individual carbon footprint and helping them with having an app for solutions that they can adopt. Then we felt, as we worked on it, we felt in India, where there's a huge mass, this needs a lot of time and energy and resource to do it. That was one. And two, we felt a lot of companies are having enormous amount of emissions and all of that. So why don't we tap there? Because close to 60 to 65 percentage of emissions are from industries. And we felt it's where a company can make probably what a uh, uh, a community could do in just a couple of hours. They might be having enormous amount of emissions, what probably even a community of 10,000 people can do, right? And we felt, okay, let's probably focus there because that seems to be of high impact to the scale that we wanted to do. Then we slightly pivoted to that, and we were decided, okay, we'll work with industries. And according to us, there are four levels at which one takes a climate action. So one is at the individual level, two is at a company, corporate, organizational level, three is a community, neighborhood level, and four is a city, government, and a policy level. So we decided that we'll be enablers and empowerers for people to take climate action. We are not going to invent something or discover something because all of the solutions already exist. All of the funds that is needed for taking climate action also already exist. What needs is a lot of collaboration, a lot of mindset shift, a lot of people to come together, make decisions, and start implementing solutions. So we felt, okay, we'll bridge that gap, and that is what we will start with, probably organizational level or a corporate level. And that's how we started working with companies to help companies on their overall carbon management and their ESG management. So we help companies with setting up systems for tracking their emissions, developing an emission reduction roadmap, helping them out doing feasibility studies to implement projects, and also eventually implement projects to reduce their emissions. And as we did that, we felt in India, carbon management was too much of a niche, and companies were focusing on their overall sustainability or ESG management. So then we started to cater then for the companies' entire sustainability management, and we act as their knowledge partners for their entire sustainability management in helping them out on probably measuring their emissions, developing targets, goals, plans, implementing those action steps. Pretty much, you can kind of consider us to be like your outsourced people who sit along with you and help you out on implementing your sustainability initiatives. Our idea is to say companies have their core business, you can focus on that. Our core is sustainability. We'll come sit with you, help you along in implementing those things as subject matter experts and pretty much like your knowledge partners for your sustainability. So that's pretty much what we do. And we do it as a consulting service, and we also have a tech product. We're a serve prod company, and whatever we do as a service, we are slowly converting into a product so that what we are able to do, we can do it at scale. So product is pretty much now in a pilot stage, but that's pretty much what we do. My background, why beyond sustainability, what we do, and all of that.
Actually, that is amazing, Hari. Thanks for that insight. ஏன் sustainability, ESG management பத்தி industries இப்போ concentrate பண்ணிட்டு இருக்காங்க? Why they should concentrate in the future goals of bringing net zero? What is the important in that?
So basically, I think now it's become a trend, right? It's become fancy. It's become a trend to talk about sustainability. But pretty much the problem has been the same since industrial levelization started, and we started building more products out of industries and all of that. So அப்ப இருந்தே இந்த ப்ராப்ளம் இருக்கு. பட் அப்ப வந்து அது வேற டேர்ம்ஸ்ல இருந்தது, இப்ப அது வேற டேர்ம்ஸ்ல சொல்றோம். அது மட்டும் தான் மாறி இருக்கே தவிர தி ஆக்ஷன் ஹஸ் பீன் வெரி லெஸ் இஃப் ஐம் பீங் வெரி ஆனஸ்ட். ஸோ அப்போ வந்து இனிஷியலி தே கால் இட் ஆஸ் குளோபல் வார்மிங் ஒரு டேர்ம் வந்தது, தே இன்ட்ரடியூஸ் தட். தென் தே சே இட்ஸ் climate change, and climate change பத்தி பேசினாங்க. Then there was a lot of science around it to prove that climate change is happening because of human activities. Then people called it as we should develop sustainably and called it as sustainable development. Millennial development goals in only 2005 UN brought up something that they changed into sustainable development goals by 2030, and then they started taking a lot of thing, and then people started talking about SDGs. Now ESG has become a term, and then people have started talking about ESG, right? So அந்த ப்ராப்ளம் வந்து அது டிஃப்ரெண்ட் வார்த்தைகள்னால எவால்வ் ஆயிருக்கே தவிர problem is pretty much the same. The problem is to say whatever I do shouldn't harm the ecosystem that's around me, right? So அதுதான் problem. அந்த mindset and அந்த process of whatever we do is harming the ecosystem is the problem. அதை நம்ம எப்படி சொல்றோங்கிறது தான் is kept on changing. And இது வந்து இட்ஸ் நாட் ஜஸ்ட் அபவுட் கார்பன் எமிஷன்ஸ் ஆர் கிளைமேட் ப்ராப்ளம். ஹோலிஸ்டிக்கா பார்த்தா வாட்டர் வேஸ்ட், how do we affect the ecosystem, the sustainability அப்படிங்கிறதே is a problem. To simple it out, there are three things in sustainability. There is degeneration, where you say எனக்கு வந்து என்ன ஆனாலும் பரவாயில்ல, ஐ வில் எக்ஸ்ப்ளாய்ட் திங்ஸ் அரவுண்ட் மீ அண்ட் ஐ வில் பில்ட் எக்கானமி ஆர் வாட் எவர் ஐ டூ ஆன் டாப் ஆஃப் தட், ரைட்? அண்ட் அங்கதான் வந்து பீப்புள் சே, ஏ ஐ டோன்ட் ரியலி கேர், there's a forest, I can commercialize that forest, I will cut down that forest and I will build my economy, right? So that is a degenerative a practice or degenerative sustainability. Sustainability is when you say நான் இருக்கிறத ரீடைன் பண்ணுவேன் and I will just sustain as it exists, right? And I will not add more harm to what is already happening. And that is called sustainability. And conventional, நம்ம இப்போ பேசுறது எல்லாமே is a conventional sustainability approach thought process, where you say, hey, I will not harm any further. But we should move towards அது இதெல்லாம் வந்து நம்ம ஒரு 1990s 2000s பண்ணியிருக்கணும். பட் இப்பதான் நம்ம பண்ண ஆரம்பிச்சிருக்கோம். But right now the demand from the planet itself is that we need to move to a regenerative sustainability, where you're saying, let me restore the damage I've done. நான் 60-70 வருஷமா I've done a lot of damage. I should probably start restoring that and not just stop about sustainability. People call it as regenerative sustainability, right? So அப்படி பார்க்கும்போது ரைட் நவ் இப்பதான் நம்ம கொஞ்சம் அந்த டீஜெனரேஷன்ல இருந்து கன்வென்ஷனல் சஸ்டைனபிலிட்டி நோக்கி வந்திருக்கோம், வேர் வி ரியலைஸ் த இம்பாக்ட் ஆஃப் டீஜெனரேஷன் அண்ட் ஸ்லோலி வி சேயிங், ஹே ஐ வில் ஸ்டார்ட் ப்ரொடெக்டிங் சர்டன் ஆஃப் மை ரிசோர்சஸ் அண்ட் ஸ்லோலி வி வில் ஹவ் டு எவால்வ் அண்ட் மூவ் டுவர்ட்ஸ் அ ரீஜெனரேட்டிவ் வேர்ல்டு வேர் எனிதிங் தட் வி டூ should be regenerative in nature, where it not just harms but also restores some of the things that we've done. So that is on a very uh, uh, bottom level on how the economic development or anything that we call as a development in the principle நோக்கி இருக்கணுங்கிறது is a point of view and something that we also vouch for strongly. And secondly, இப்போ நம்ம climate effects நிறைய ஃபேஸ் பண்ண ஆரம்பிச்சிட்டோம், ரைட்? இப்போ சென்னையில வந்து ஒரு 10 வருஷம் முன்னாடி ஃப்ளட், ஒரு 15 இயர்ஸ் முன்னாடி ஃப்ளட் வர்றதுங்கிறது இட்ஸ் நாட் அ நார்மல் திங். பட் இப்போ எல்லா வருஷமும் ஃப்ளட் வர்றது இஸ் பிகம் நார்மல். அண்ட் எனக்கு ரொம்ப ஆச்சரியமா இருந்தது என்னன்னா, ஐ யூஸ் டு லிவ் இன் டி நகர் வென் ஐ வாஸ் இன் சென்னை. அண்ட் எனக்கு கோயம்புத்தூர்ல ஃப்ளட் இஸ் நாட் அ திங் அட் ஆல். ஸோ எனக்கு வெளியில போனா ரோட் ஃபுல்லா தண்ணி இருக்கு, பட் பீப்புள் ஆர் ஜஸ்ட் கோயிங் ஆஸ் இட் இஸ் அட் பிஸ்னஸ் அஸ் யூஷுவல். ஆஃபீஸ்ல லீவ் கேட்டா, மழை பெஞ்ச எதுக்கு லீவ் கேட்கறா, ஆஃபீஸுக்கு வான்னு சொல்றாங்க. எனக்கு அது புரியவே இல்லை. திஸ் இஸ் நாட் நார்மல், ரைட்? திஸ் இஸ் நாட் நார்மல் ஃபார் யூ டு walk through flood and to be doing things. But இப்போ நம்ம வந்து we are used to and we've made floods as business as usual, right? But that's not a normality or a normal thing. So இந்த மாதிரி இந்த climate effects increase ஆகுறது has made certain people more aware to it, and people are saying, okay, what can we do? And அப்படி பார்க்கும்போது then companies, the all of this when we mean by flood, cyclone, இல்லை இப்போ கேரளாவில் நடந்த லேண்ட்ஸ்லைட், அது எல்லாமே இஸ் அன் எஃபெக்ட் ஆஃப் கிளைமேட் சேஞ்ச். பட் அதுக்கு அது காஸ்ட் என்ன அப்படின்னு பார்த்தா, தி கார்பன் எமிஷன்ஸ் தட் வி புட் அவுட் இன் டு தி அட்மாஸ்பியர். ஸோ இது எப்படின்னா, பீப்புள் ஆர் நவ் ட்ரைங் டு பில்ட் சொல்யூஷன்ஸ் ஃபார் தி எஃபெக்ட் ஆஃப் கிளைமேட் சேஞ்ச் அண்ட் நாட் த காஸ்ட். இப்போ ஃப்ளட் வருது, சரி நான் ஃப்ளட்டை மிட்டிகேட் பண்றதுக்கு நான் இன்ஃப்ராஸ்ட்ரக்சரை மாத்துறேன், இல்லை அதிகமாக மழை பெய்யுதுன்னா நான் அதுக்கேற்ற மாதிரி இன்ஃப்ராஸ்ட்ரக்சரை மாத்துறேன், விச் இஸ் ஒன் டைப் ஆஃப் ஹவ் யூ கேன் அப்ரோச் த ப்ராப்ளம். But until you solve for the cost, the effect is only going to increase. This is like saying, எனக்கு கோவிட்ல நிறைய பேருக்கு காய்ச்சல் வந்தப்போ they ate paracetamol, felt good for a couple of hours, but as long as COVID is within your body, you're going to get the effects, right? அது மாதிரி தான் அந்த கோவிட் or இங்க காஸ் என்ன அப்படின்னு பார்த்தா, is the carbon emissions that we put out into the atmosphere. And அந்த carbon emissions more we reduce, I think we will be able to reduce the effects of climate change. And அதுக்காக தான் then all companies are saying, இப்போ என்னோட ப்ராசஸஸ்ல கார்பன் எமிஷன் வருது, so by the year 2050 I will reduce my carbon emissions. India வந்து said we will become net zero by the year 2070, which means எங்களோட wherever carbon emission that are happening, we will reduce it through technology, through different, we will also offset by planting trees and அந்த மாதிரியான ப்ராஜெக்ட்ஸ். அண்ட் eventually we will become net zero அப்படிங்கிறது தான் is the objective of the government as well. And yeah, pretty much then the companies and all of it is also happening. So I think that's pretty much the reason of why now net zero sustainability we talk about and all of this.
Great. Actually, that sums up what I asked for. If, as you said, we have created a lot of things before this decade. ஆனா நம்ம வந்து இப்போதான் we are searching for resolution. We are targeting for the rise of 1.5 degrees Celsius. அது நடக்கக்கூடாது until 2050, but we are already touching 1.2 and nearby, right? Do you think is it actually possible to bring net zero in all the industries? Because all over SMEs and global employment element it accounts for over 50% of the employment, and bringing net zero inside may also have a bigger impact in that. So, do you think is it really possible to bring net zero to reduce the carbon emission inside the industries?
So, right now, if you ask me, definitely not possible. But we should become that better than where we were yesterday, right? So that's why companies say I will become net zero by 2050, 2040, and not that hey, I will become net zero by 2 years, right? Because ஒரு industry வந்து இவ்வளோ ஒரு factory எடுத்துக்கிட்டாலும் say it's the 1,000 crore company, it would have taken at least a couple of decades or at least a decade to evolve into that sort of a company. And அதை நீ அப்படியே நாளைக்கு நெட் ஜீரோ ஆகணும்னா they will have to change everything in their process, right? And it's practically not possible. So that's why companies say probably every year or 2%, 3% of my emissions I will reduce, and they take a step-by-step approach on how they can become net zero. And I think thinking on the other side, இது வந்து practical possible ஆனா like I said, maybe not right away, but we have all the technologies that is needed to become net zero or to reduce our carbon emissions. We also have the funds that is necessary to do it. We just need to bring people together and implement some of the solutions at scale and make it commercially also viable for people so that people start adopting to these solutions. And I think that is definitely possible, right? And I can easily say at least 80 to 90 percentage of our emissions we can actually reduce by adopting technologies and all of that. Then குறைக்க முடியாத அந்த emissions we can offset by planting trees or any form of an ecosystem restoration project, so that and the emissions are being taken out by those offsets that people do. So I definitely believe that there are feasibility for this to happen, and companies should just adopt them from a step-by-step manner. And in terms of an SME, right? And then SMEs need uh, for them the funds itself, their business itself is a day-to-day problem, right? For someone for whom the business itself is a problem, you can't ask them to focus on sustainability and all of that. I think that's where a lot of intervention from government or institutions, or even taking a cluster based approach would be possible. Instead of treating each company as an independent, you can treat them as a cluster. If, for example, we're working on multiple projects in Tirupur, but it's a cluster based approach, or a similar type of companies, or a textile cluster, and the cluster we take an approach as a cluster on how they can become net zero. One example that I can tell you is Tirupurla vandu there used to be a huge problem of wastewater that goes and mixes with the river uh, or 10 years முன்னாடி. But a lot of companies started adopting wastewater treatment plants. So large companies, they have their own plant inside the company. Small SMEs, they go to a common treatment plant. So அவங்க இருக்க ஏரியாலேயே ஒரு காமன் CETPன்னு சொல்லுவாங்க. They have a common treatment plant, and அங்க the water gets treated and then it goes and discharges into the river, and they have a zero liquid discharge that they're practicing in that cluster, right? So இதெல்லாம் is a very collaborative effort which is being done to do it. So இந்த மாதிரியான efforts தான் I think probably would be more suited for a country like India, where there are a lot of SMEs, where there's a lot of collaboration happens, and or a collective in the mariana solutions that multiple companies can adopt is what will be the need of the hour if we have to practically make net zero possible for India.
Okay. Can you give me one more anecdote with a different type of industry where this cluster collaboration can be effective?
See, you take any Tamil Nadu per se, right? Any industry that happen, they all of them they have their happen in particular clusters. If Chennai எடுத்துக்கிட்டா, Sriperumbudur, which is on the outskirts of the city, is one of the clusters where a lot of production happens. North of Chennai, where a lot of oil and gas companies are present, and that's in itself is an industry cluster. You take Ambattur Avadi, that's an industrial cluster in Chennai, right? You take Gumidipudi, that's an industrial cluster in Chennai. So in the Mari, lot of these are happens on a cluster-based level. So on the cluster, Angirke industry ki enna venumo. So some might be an automobile cluster, some might be an oil and gas cluster, and all of these. So on the industry ki, anga what could be done, அப்படிங்கறத analyze பண்ணி taking an approach can be highly effective. So again, each cluster varies, right? For Hosula, there's a different type of cluster. For Coimbatore, Tirupurla, there's a different type of cluster. So on the industry sector, Keta Madri, then taking an approach with something that would help. Like it's not like a one size fits all kind of a solution. Kandipa கிடையாது. It has to be very localized. And இப்போ நிறைய சிப்காட்ஸ் இருக்கு, நிறைய அந்த கிளஸ்டர்ஸ் இருக்கு. ஸோ ஒரு பர்டிகுலர் சிப்காட்டுக்கு வாட் எவர் வுட் ஒர்க், அந்த ஸ்டேக் ஹோல்டர்ஸை இன்வால்வ் பண்ணி there has to be something that needs to be done. Someone who's sitting in Delhi cannot be building solutions for Coimbatore. That's not going to be effective. They can build, but அது எஃபெக்டிவா இம்ப்ளிமெண்ட் ஆகுமானா ஐம் நாட் வெரி ஷுர் அபவுட் தட். ஸோ அங்கே இருக்க ஸ்டேக் ஹோல்டர்ஸை இன்வால்வ் பண்ணி அவங்க சேலஞ்சஸ் என்னங்கிறத அண்டர்ஸ்டாண்ட் பண்ணி then building on the Maria cluster based approach would be something that would be highly effective. So yeah.
Yeah. So I had this question to be asked to the last, but if I'm thinking it should be now. This we are speaking about net zero sustainability. How can industries impact the globe? But is there any profit uh, related for industries who are working on sustainability? So what will be the profit for them?
There are three drivers. So why should a company do sustainability? It has to make a business sense. For a company, to take a company, why does a company exist? To make more money and to
Yeah.
generate more profits. Or a company is nothing but a pool of shareholders, and they've invested their money. They want more money in return. So that's how basically any company operates. Um, so what does it make as an enterprise value or a business value for a company to focus on sustainability? There are right now majorly three drivers. So one of the driver is a customer driven or market driven approach. So say if you're supplying to a company that is from Europe, and or a large textile brand that you're supplying to from Tirupur அப்படின்னு எடுத்துக்கிட்டா, so that say that company in Europe wants to become net zero by 2050, and you are a supplier to them. So only if all of their suppliers become net zero, the company can actually become net zero by 2050. So what they say is, I want you to become net zero by 2045, so that I can align to my, I want you to align to my net zero goal plans, and only then you might be my preferred vendor. If not, I might go to someone who was probably aligning to my sustainability goal and vision, because this is an important agenda, right? So in the மாதிரி not just Europe or US foreign companies மட்டும் இல்ல, இந்தியால இருக்க large size manufacturing companies, so they say they have a program called sustainable procurement program. So on the program மூலியமா they engage their supply chain on how their entire supply chain can become sustainable net zero, and they engage them with. So in the customer or a market is one of the forces for why a company needs to take action, right? So say if you're an SME where 70% of your supply goes to one of these big player, and if they ask that, it's important to retain their business, so they would do it. If not, then you're going to lose your customer. So that is one of the driving forces. That is the major driving force that we would pretty much say from our experience. Second is a regulatory driving force. So India is committed to become net zero by 2070, and SEBI, the stock exchange uh, agency in India, the Bureau of Stock Exchange in India, has come up with a mandate to say every listed company, especially the 1,000 major listed companies, and in the coming years, the remaining companies also have to mandatorily come out with a ESG report. அவங்களே ஒரு ஃபார்மேட் கொடுத்து இந்த டேட்டா பாயிண்ட்ஸ் வந்து you have to disclose every year along with your financial reporting to say how is your ESG doing, and in the coming years they want you to get it audited from a third party auditor as well. ஸோ ஒரு 5-10 இயர்ஸ்ல இந்தியாவில் சஸ்டைனபிலிட்டி எப்படி ஆயிரும்னா, லைக் ஹவ் யூ ஹாவ் அ ஃபினான்ஷியல் அக்கௌண்டிங் ஆர் ஃபினான்ஷியல் ஆடிட்டர், யூ வில் ஆல்சோ ஹாவ் அ சஸ்டைனபிலிட்டி அக்கௌண்டிங் ஆர் சஸ்டைனபிலிட்டி ஆடிட்டர் ஹூ ஆடிட்ஸ் யுவர் என்டையர் ESG பர்ஃபார்மன்ஸ் அண்ட் சேஸ் உங்க டேட்டாலாம் வந்து கரெக்ட், நீங்க எதையும் வந்து ஃபேக் பண்ணல இல்லை மார்க் பண்ணல. And other, the SEBI will rate to say how is the company improving year on year, right? So that regulation, that is again brought in out from a very regulatory point of view. So in the Mariana, regulations are also a driving force. So that is one example that I can. There are multiple examples. So this just taken. I've taken one of the examples, right? If you're supplying to Europe, Abdina, for a particular 4 or 5 projects, their products particularly, they've come up with a carbon tax. So the product has to go with its own particular product carbon footprint, and if it is above a certain limit, they will have to pay a carbon tax and get a certificate. So that's become also a regulatory push for companies to reduce their emissions and all of that. So that is from a regulation becomes a driver. Third, it's investor driven. So you have an investor who comes from US or Europe. They will have to disclose to their financial institution that their fund is going to a project that's already green or has a plan to become green and has a plan to become net zero and all of that. Abdina தான் that financial institution might fund the investor. So then if you have such investors on your board, so then that's become very investor driven as well. So India limit a lot of banks have started to measure their financed emissions. So there's something called as financed emissions. If I give you a certain amount of loan, இதனால if you are taking out a process or an activity and some emissions happens for it, that's also part of my emissions because I am funding it. So companies now, these financial institutions want to reduce those emissions or at least want to account for it and all of that. So that is also becoming one of the drivers on companies to take climate action. So major any company, if they are having a motivation to take climate action now, இந்த மூணுல ஏதோ ஒரு டிரைவர்ல they will fall under, and that is what we will understand and kind of அவங்களோட approach will be around uh, uh, satisfying that need and that pain point தான் இருக்கும். So yeah.
Yeah, that was pretty much clear. Uh, so there was an IEA report which was telling around 30% of carbon emission are coming from sectors like steel, cement, chemical industries, and these people. So, as in my basic lens, these industries are very critical to reduce the carbon emissions, right? Obviously, in steel, cement are the industries which has the highest carbon emission rates. If either compare பண்ணும்போது, you have worked around 70 industries plus. What was the biggest challenge in decarbonizing these heavy industries, and how beyond sustainability your startup is addressing these hurdles?
So basically, these heavy, high polluting industries, right? You can also say it the other way is probably Tamil Nadu Pollution Control Board, but probably most of these industries would also come under the red category because they just the production itself is highly intense and highly pollutive in nature per se. So yeah, but again, wherever you have a problem, you also have an opportunity on how the problem can be addressed, right? To give you one example, I don't want to quote a company's name, but a large public company has newly built or in developing a product. Or developing their entire project. They're building a new factory that's entirely green in nature. They're calling it a green factory, and they want to produce green steel, which is by green steel in the sense something that's like sort of a net zero steel and all of that, right? So on the Mariana opportunity, so it lies with the problem is majorly where with business as usual, you want to actually reduce your emissions and all of that. So in the மாதிரி புது production பண்ணும்போது புது plant பண்ணும்போது changing that is very different to versus something that already exists, and trying to make that more sustainable is where the majority of the challenge is. And what we do again, like you sense is எங்களோட approach, either they're highly polluting or not, approach remains the same. We try to identify, okay, where are their emission hotspots, where the emissions are majorly happening, and அதுல we look at the low hanging fruits. எங்க வந்து immediate sort of for a low effort, high impact இருக்கிற activities we try and identify within their emission hotspots and say these are the low hanging fruits, right? Something that can be easily done. So we try and start taking action based on them. And where there are probably high impact but still a high resources needed, then we try and look into what the company can do. The company also does a lot of R&D into what can be done, and they will have plans in such a way. So in the short term goals, which is between 1 to 5 years or 1 to 3 years, will be on these low hanging fruits. Then they'll have a midterm goal to say, okay, I will figure out certain things and I want to probably do them within a time frame of 5 to 10 years and have it as midterm goals. And they will have long-term goals to say, okay, these are all the things they probably need to do a bit of R&D into and also really build towards it and have a long-term plan. So on the Mary, we'll take a phased-wise approach and then kind of help them out on how they can become net zero on it. So yeah, and each approach from a company to company will be very different because each company operates very differently. We might be working with two similar company from a similar industry, but ரெண்டு பேரோட approach may business strategy may இல்ல அவங்க leadership பொறுத்து it will be very different, though they might be from a same sector. So from a company to company the approach will definitely be different. So அந்த கம்பெனிக்கு என்ன வேணுமோ அவங்களோட strategy படி is how we will understand and also try and help them out.
Clear, got it. So recent days, people have been speaking a lot about carbon credits and carbon credits trading. Can you throw some words on it? What is carbon credits?
So yeah, basically, what is a carbon credit is basically where you say or a ton of CO2 emission reduction is called as one credit or one carbon credit. So basically, say if you have or a farm of 1,000 acres and you have multiple trees, and each tree can take close to 20 kilograms of CO2 in a year, 20 to 40 kilograms in a year. So you measure or வருஷத்துல or whatever be your 10-year time period எவ்வளோ கார்பன் எமிஷன்ஸ் ப்ராபப்ளி உங்களோட ஃபார்ம் கேன் ஆர் இன்டேக்குங்கிறத மெஷர் பண்ணி then you go through a standard and you convert them into equivalent carbon credits for 1,000 tons abhina, then you get 1,000 credits which you can trade off to companies which want to offset their emissions and buy these credits from. So other has its own structure, its own process on how it needs to be done. So carbon credits are seen to be a solution for companies which can't reduce their emissions into becoming net zero and all of it. But it's slightly complicated if the market is becoming. India has a huge potential to become a big player in the carbon credit space. India is also working on bringing in their own standard for carbon credits and all of that. But it has certain loopholes and certain gray areas which the market itself is now trying to fix and figure it out and all of that. If, for example, say you plant trees and then there's a forest fire that happens. அப்போ நீங்க இவ்வளவு நாள் அப்போ அக்கௌண்ட் பண்ண கார்பன் எமிஷன்ஸ்லாம் it's only now gone back into the atmosphere, right? So then how can that be considered as a in the Mari, there are certain challenges which again the market is trying to figure out and sort it out. And in the Mariana, there are 1 2 cases that has also become a talking point, and people are trying to address it. So that's pretty much about the carbon market or the carbon credit space. And India has a huge potential to be a big player in this market. இப்போ எங்களோட clients, we help them with their voluntary carbon offset. இப்போ அவங்க volunteer they want to do carbon offsets, we help them out. In the carbon credits we've not done pretty much a lot of projects, or we just consult our
Okay,
clients. That's not something that we've tapped into its potential as of now, but we pretty much work on emission measurement reduction, so on. So yeah.
great. Around we have spoken a lot about net zero and how beyond sustainability is doing in net zero emissions and SMEs. People, we have been moving digitalized, right? So according to a McKinsey report, around 50% of digitalization technology can help in sustainability growth. So where do you see these AI, ML, IoT devices or these technologies can bring a carbon uh, zero, net zero things? Where are we at that?
See, yeah. So, couple of viewpoints. Again, there's no right, wrong, but just two very different viewpoints from a very scientific basis, right? So, it takes enormous amount of carbon emission if you have to develop an AI model, because all is through data servers, lot of data accumulation, and all of that, right? So, if you have to develop a carbon model, it has enormous amount of water it consumes to run the data centers, as well as the carbon emissions that happens because of it. So if you take Google, for example, they were actually a net zero company. They were a climate neutral company, but now that they've started working on their AI solutions and all that, they've actually not been able to meet their net zero goals last year. And Apple is not, I mean, Google is not a net zero company as of now, just because they've taken the AI solution, other kind of research and all of that work that's really increased their emissions highly, right? And that's an example of saying that even a climate neutral company, because now they're trying to adapt to the different technology, they've not been able to meet their goals per se. So that's happening in the industry, and that's something that is a huge problem because of the high intensity of the power, the resources that's required to run such models. But again, if you ask me, that's the downside, right? That's something that we have to be more conscious about and try to also build for, okay, how do I do this in terms of addressing, say, if you have or a data center in Chennai, where Chennai has its own water issues and all of that. If that data center is going to consume enormous amount of water, where is that water going to come from? So that is a huge sustainability challenge around that we are actually facing now with this technology development and all of that, right? So that is in itself a challenge. But on the other side, what AI, ML, or all of blockchain, all of these technologies can do is also help us aid in uh, taking action related to climate change much easier, right? And we're also building a product that can help companies to reduce their emissions, automate a lot of things, and all of that. In that way, they can be a huge solution. There are already multiple AI integrated solutions that have been applied, deployed, and being done at large scale. They've been completely automated farming that happens, which is ensuring that close to 50 to 60 percentage of resource consumption is being reduced because everything is data driven and automated within that particular farm and all of that, right? So அந்த மாதிரியான அப்சைடுமே இருக்கு. It's again about how do we balance both of it. A technology is only a tool, and the tool is on the hands of how someone uses it, right? And once you know both the downside and the upside of it, then you're then the next approach should be to see how can you balance out the downside and be more conscious about implementing the technology so that it doesn't go back into affecting yourself அப்படிங்கிறது தான் with the approach. But on a very principle level, all of this sounds nice, but practically அப்படிதான் எல்லாரும் பண்றாங்களான்னா கிடையாது. Everyone wants to implement something with AI and all of that. And in the downside, எல்லாத்தையும் கன்சிடர் பண்ணி தான் இப்போ பண்றோமானா I don't think so. But it's too early with people also for them to also understand all of this. But I think as we evolve, we will also start then focusing on these sustainability issues around AI and all of that, and see how we can mitigate it.
Okay, so actually நீங்க சொன்னதுல ஒரு இன்ட்ரெஸ்டிங் விஷயம், the downside was Google's AI and data centers are making it create more emissions. Can you break down that for me, how AI and these things are bringing emissions?
Okay, so basically, say now we are on a call, right? I'll just probably try to make it simple. How much carbon emissions do you think 1 hour of this virtual meeting would have? Just take any guess.
I'm not sure. I don't think there is an emission here
No, there's actually
except
a
the
carbon.
electricity.
There's actually a carbon emission that happens. Just take a guess. ஒரு கிலோ 2 கிலோ 5 கிலோ எவ்வளோ emissions இருக்கும் because of this Zoom call or this G Meet call that we are taking.
Probably 2.5 to 3.
It's half a kilogram. Okay, in 1 hour, நம்ம ஒரு virtual callல இருந்தோம்னா, it has an emission of half a kilogram. இப்போ இந்த half a kilogram emission எங்க இருந்து வருது? Where do you think this emission is coming from?
That's where I doubt of. I'm not sure where it is coming from.
So நம்ம ரெண்டு பேர் பேசுறோம். We are not doing any activity. There is something called as a digital carbon footprint, which means in the
Okay.
data is coming through internet. So any data, you are a tech person, you know, it needs to be stored in a database. இந்த டேட்டா உங்க சிஸ்டம்ல ஸ்டோர் ஆகல, என் சிஸ்டம்ல ஸ்டோர் ஆகலன்னா, அப்போ ஏதோ ஒரு சர்வர்ல ஏதோ ஒரு சிஸ்டம்ல இந்த டேட்டா இஸ் கெட்டிங் ஸ்டோர்ட். அப்போ then that is what people call it as data servers and data centers. And there are huge facilities that are built only to run those data centers. So on the data center run panna, you need energy. And almost 80% of internet is communicated through communication cables and not through the air. That is something that we know. So other run பண்றதுக்கு you need enormous amount of electricity that needs to be done. இதை மெஷர் பண்ணி தான் we say, hey, it has a digital carbon footprint of half a kilogram அப்படின்னு. So everything that we do on the internet, right? You might just be sitting at home and watching Netflix. Watching a 3 hour movie Netflix is equivalent to almost traveling 30 to 50 kilometers in a car, right? Scrolling Instagram will have its own carbon emission. Sending a message on WhatsApp versus sending a GIF image on WhatsApp will have a higher carbon digital carbon footprint per se, right? So everything that we do digitally is also going to have its own digital carbon footprint. So this is the basis in which we say that the carbon emissions or a digital carbon footprint that happens. So in terms of an AI model, then you can imagine how much data it is going to take to run an AI model. So then it will need more servers, it will need more resources, and that's where we then say, hey, it actually it just needs to be at an exponential level, right, for an AI model to run. So that is where we then say, hey, it has an enormous amount of digital carbon footprint and all of that.
Okay, that's interesting actually. So, இந்த மாதிரி indirect carbon emissions like digital carbon emission, do we have something else that we are not noting of?
No, I think everything that we do has a carbon footprint, right? Everyone talks only about transport and all of that. The food we consume has an enormous amount of carbon footprint that's attached to it. Say if you're eating 1 kilogram of chicken, it has a carbon footprint of 6.9 kilograms. Whereas compared to eating a vegetable only has a carbon footprint of uh, 0.05 kilograms, probably 50 grams per kilo of any vegetable or a fruit you consume. That's the carbon footprint. So when you compare the diet itself, it has a huge difference in terms of being a non-vegetarian and a vegetarian. Again, I won't say vegetarian, non-veg சாப்பிடுறதே தப்பு, everyone should become vegetarian. That's not what I'm trying to say. And what I'm trying to communicate is that can we be more conscious about our consumption? So that's all I'm trying to communicate in terms of can we be more conscious about our food choices. So yeah, our diet itself has a huge impact in terms of the amount of carbon footprint it has. Say a t-shirt that you buy has a carbon footprint of close to 5 to 10 kilograms. So every t-shirt we see sales uh, buy three get five, you go buy five, right? But we don't see that underlying environmental or ecological impact of that. So anything that we consume is going to have its own effect in terms of the sustainability. But again, I don't try to mean again we shouldn't consume anything. Can we be more conscious as a consumer is all that we would also want to try to communicate and ask people to think about. Yeah.
So that was really interesting. Uh, so here I have learned, actually digital carbon footprints was a new concept for me. So thanks for bringing that up. So we are left with last 7 minutes of our conversation, and I have last two questions to ask for all the audience here. First thing, you according to a report which says we have to reduce 45% of the carbon emission which we are doing now by 2050, right? And I want you to give some points for the new startup founders or anyone else who is coming up with a sustainability plan. What are the trends that can be taken up in the next 10 to 20 years that can bring a good impact in the sustainability forum? in the ESG firm. And number two, I want to give some tips for a common people, a commoner who is around, where they can reduce the carbon emission as a self in their habitat.
Cool. So first, again, I don't know if everyone will say this, but at least something that I would strongly believe is anything that you want to build an enterprise for, or an organization for, or a startup for, right? Startup is what basically you're testing an idea. It has to become a venture. If something has to become a venture, then it has to become an organization and all of that, right? If you want to build an organization and build and start working on a solution, you need to have a problem that you love with. By love for the problem, I don't mean அந்த ப்ராப்ளம் நிறைய பேருக்கு இருக்கு and you should feel இந்த ஸ்பைடர் படத்துல வர மாதிரி அந்த மாதிரி கிடையாது வில்லன் பண்ற மாதிரி. But I mean that problem is something you're deeply in love with, that you want to solve for that problem, right? And that problem is what you want to solve for. So it's not about the solution, it's about that problem, addressing that problem, and that you want to solve for. So try and pick one problem that personally aligns a lot with you. If you take a lot of startups, it's either the founders build a solution because they've seen someone who's been affected by that problem, be moved by it, and want to build a solution for it, or they themselves have had that problem and they want to build a solution for that and do it right. If you take a lot of successful entrepreneurs, they've tried and done that. So it's about picking up a problem that really aligns well with you and then trying to build a solution is something that I will vouch for. இப்போ சஸ்டைனபிலிட்டியில என்ன ப்ராப்ளம்னா உங்களை சுத்தி பார்த்தாலே யூ வில் சி மல்டிபிள் ப்ராப்ளம்ஸ், ரைட்? அண்ட் அதுல வாட் எவர் இஸ் இம்பாக்டிங் யூ டீப்லி யூ கேன் ட்ரை பில்ட் அ சொல்யூஷன் ஃபார். அண்ட் எனி ப்ராப்ளம் தட் இஸ் ஹேவிங் இட்ஸ் ஓன் ப்ராப்ளம் ஹேஸ் டு ஹாவ் ஒரு இட் ஹேஸ் டு பி சிக்னிஃபிகன்ட் ப்ராப்ளம் டு சால்வ். பை சிக்னிஃபிகன்ஸ் ஐ மீன் எவ்வளோ பேருக்கு இந்த ப்ராப்ளம் இருக்கு, ரைட்? இப்போ இது வந்து ஒரு லோக்கல் ப்ராப்ளமா, இல்லை இது வந்து ஒரு குளோபல் ப்ராப்ளமா, இல்லை எனி ப்ராப்ளம் you can take to solve it at a local level, but you can also scale it up to globally as something that can have a global impact. But take for example, hey, I want to solve for plastic bottle recycling or plastic bottle waste. That's a global problem, but you can start addressing it at a local level and building a solution and something that can be done, right? So that's what I mean by look locally but something that can have a global impact, and try and pick a problem that has a significant market to address to. So once you have that alignment, then look at this, then slowly see how you can build an effective solution that's highly efficient in nature. So just because you have a solution for sustainability doesn't mean people will buy from you, right? That should be financially efficient or lesser than what's currently there, and all of that. So it needs to also have its economic viability. So then that becomes a factor. Then you give that solution to users or people who are getting affected by the problem, and they say, "Hey, I'm ready to pay this money because you've solved a pain point for me." Then you have a product market fit. Then you can see how we can scale it up. So I think this would be the approach towards it. But the first thing starts with your passion to solve that problem, because you will have multiple challenges across your journey, and what will actually keep you moving more than everything, I think, is your passion ultimately. Ilana, then at some point, even if you built an effective solution, all that, if you don't have that passion, I don't think what will give you the push to keep doing it. Then that fire that you have initially will burn out. So that passion is the most important thing that I would say. Personally, I think I have so many challenges I've had. I still have a lot of challenges, but what still keeps me moving is the problem, right? And that I want to solve this problem. That is what has really motivated me a lot. So that is the first thing that I would say. Secondly, as an individual, I would, if you've been able to listen to this entire speech, I think you would have started to understand about the why climate change, what you can do, and all of that. One thing that I will ask you is look around and see what are all the places you can be more conscious about, right? இப்போ நாளைக்கு ஒரு பொருள் வாங்க போறோம்னா அது உண்மையாவே நமக்கு தேவையா? And doing it for your need and not for your want is something that I would ask all the individuals to think about and have a shift in their mindset. அது மாறிச்சுனாலே I think everything else will automatically change, right? For example, நம்ம ஒரு ஃபங்க்ஷனுக்கு போறோம், 4 பேர் 4 different கார்ல போறதுக்கு, can I actually put my ego aside and say, hey, can I carpool with you, or can you offer carpooling to someone so that there is more consciousness towards it. One day to my office I will not take a car, probably I'll take a metro, and at least one day in office. I'm not saying every day take a metro, but at least one day. I know I go to office 6 days in a week. At least one day in a half an hour extra ஆனாலும் பரவாயில்ல, I will take a metro, right, and not take my car. Probably எல்லா நாளும் நான் chicken சாப்பிடுறேன். Maybe 2 days in a week I will not have chicken because of this reason, right? And maybe I will not buy clothes based on impulse or peer pressure or anything. I will just buy clothes only if I really need it, and I will do it. So no matter the little choices people can make, but again, that ultimately boils down to your mindset and your thought process. So on the mindset shift, I would something that I would request everyone to have and see if we can slowly start asking this question and be more conscious about இது எனக்கு உண்மையாவே ஒரு நீடா இல்ல என்னோட ஒரு வாண்ட்டுக்காக நான் இந்த விஷயத்த பண்றேனா. And I think if that happens, then automatically you'll become more conscious. And if people see you becoming more conscious, they'll be like, நீ ஏன் இது பண்ற, ஒரு 4 பேர் கேட்டாங்கன்னா இல்ல ஒரு person will definitely change looking at you. And I think that's how change happens. So yeah.
Thanks for throwing that up, Hari. So actually, uh, last 2 decades of Bina, we have been facing a lot of climate change issues, and last 5 to 10 years, I could say, we have started to take steps regarding it. And I wish this has to be changed entirely, and we have to achieve the goal of net zero by 2050 as we are planning for. And thank you for taking this time up and explaining all the details in net zero, and how an employee, how a user, how a corporate life can change a net zero emission part. And also I have learned some new different things where net zero is very important, and where are we producing carbons. Thanks for bringing all the point out. Thank you, Hari. Thanks for joining this call.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Lavershan, and thanks to everyone who's been part of the session as well. I hope it was useful to you, and please reach out in case you need any help. Happy to collaborate and work together.
Sure, Hari. Thank you. Thanks for your time.